What up, y'all? Welcome back to Practice, where we fuse research and culture to help you develop the mindsets, habits, and skills that you need in order to live out your purpose with confidence. I'm your coach, Dr. Reese, and it's time for us to get better, y'all. Let's grow. Today in Practice, we're talking about how do you become a confident leader and a wise follower. So what we're doing is we're putting some respect on followership. And followership is one of my favorite words that don't even really exist. And I hate that because when I type it into any of my documents, it has a little squiggly red line underneath as if I don't know how to spell. Because followership's not a real word. Because as a society, we put so much more respect on being a leader that being a follower has almost become the bad thing to do, the wrong thing to do. Like even in our parenting, and it's always like, not our parenting because we're intentional with it, but even in parenting, you always hear people say, don't be a follower. Well, if I'm not supposed to be a follower and I'm only focused on being a leader, then who is following me if I'm only focused on being a leader? And so I want to change that narrative. I want to be somebody who is known for influencing people to not only want to be great leaders, but to also want to be amazing followers. And the only way that we could become great followers is if we are wise and we discern and we're intentional with who it is that we follow. So my mission is to develop confident leaders, but to also develop wise followers. And this starts in the home. So when I go and I'm dropping my son off at school, I tell him, hey, I want you to be a confident leader, but I also want you to be a wise follower. Because when you can influence the thought process that it's okay to be a follower, we just have to be very clear in who it is that we're following and knowing why we're following those people, because we're all influenced. This is why social media exists. This is why the world that we live in today looks like the way that it does, because of influence, because of human connection, because we're created for a community. Now, in that, we have to be careful because people always say, now, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you? Now, depending on, do I got a parachute? Depending on how high that bridge, like there's so many things that may come up right in that scenario. And as funny as it may be, I think it's an outdated belief. And so we have to get away from deterring people from wanting to be followers and influence them to want to be wise followers instead. And just because you're a follower doesn't mean that you can't also be a leader, because I believe that you should be in the middle. You should be confidently leading folks while also wisely following others. And I use wise intentionally because who we follow influences how we lead. I'll say that again. Who we follow influences how we lead. And that's in every single aspect of life, because we're forever being influenced by something. And if we're not aware of the social influences that are impacting us, they will permeate through us without us even knowing. And then we'll look back and be like, wow, how did I create the situation? And that's because we weren't being aware of how we were influenced. So I want to use the best case study, one of the best case studies that I know of, especially in this week, which is MLK week. But I want to talk about Martin Luther King and his ability to lead millions but follow few. So to know MLK is to know that he is one of the best leaders that we've had in the past couple hundred years, right? And he's done a lot of amazing things, which I'm going to run off here in a second. But again, he had the ability to lead millions, to change the world, to do his part, to live in his purpose. But he was also a very wise follower, and has proven that in order for you to be a great leader, in order for you to be a confident leader, you have to be very intentional, specific, and wise, and use discernment on who it is that influences your ability to lead and how you live your life. So a couple things when it comes to MLK is he's known for his leadership, but not a lot of folks talk about his followership and his followership ability. But let me just spit off a couple things that he did and that he's known for. So to know MLK is to know he was a part of the peace, nonviolent leaders movement, civil rights, and he led that civil rights movement for about 13 years before he was assassinated on April 4th. But before then, this guy went to school, this guy went to college at the age of 15. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I don't know very many people that graduated from high school and went to college at the age of 15. Now, you might advocate for somebody who did like running start. Sure, sure. But he graduated high school at 15 and then went to college. And he ended up going to Morehouse College, which is a all-male HBCU in Atlanta, that I had the privilege of visiting a couple months ago at the time of this recording. And the bigger privilege was that I had the ability to take my son. So amazing to see him soak up not only just Black culture being in Atlanta, but positive, confident, reverence-based fear leaders and young men. And one of those figures that he ran into was Martin Luther King, because Martin went there, his father went there, and his grandfather on his maternal side went there as well. So Martin has deep roots in Atlanta and at Morehouse, which is pretty cool. And so knowing that not only was dude a great leader, I feel like he really dove into his destiny and his purpose from early on. And that stemmed from how he was raised, right? So going back and talking about the influence in the home and not being a follower, or being told not to be a follower, but told to be a leader. It's cool as I was doing research and learning about Martin's life and hearing how his parents influenced him. And so when I think about that as a parent, as a new parent, I'm always thinking about what is it that I'm doing to influence, to have a positive influence, to have a healthy influence on my son in his life. Like just on a daily basis, how am I moving? How am I thinking? How am I talking? Because we are, as parents, the first leaders in our kids' lives. And I take that joint serious. And in that, it's also up to our son to learn how to pick up on what of our habits and behaviors does he want to, as he gets older, does he want to stick with? Because he's his own human being. And so as we grow, it's important for us to be able to challenge our beliefs, challenge our thoughts, challenge how we do what we do, and gain some autonomy on like, you know what? I rock with this, or I don't rock with this. I believe in this, I don't believe in this. And so being a confident leader and a wise follower fits into that same thought process, regardless of who it is. We have to be wise in particular with what it is that we're picking up. So let me get back to Martin. Martin is known for Dr. Martin. He's known for his peace and is being a non-violent leader in the civil rights movement. One of the things that he did was he led the Montgomery bus boycott, which helped end bus segregation. He also impacted, again, huge impact on the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 65. He ended up winning a Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 at the age of 35, which unfortunately later he ended up being assassinated. He was Time Magazine's Man of the Year, and he's the only non-president to have a national holiday. Fire. Like, you only do these things if you're an amazing leader. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like, you don't achieve these feats if you, number one, don't know how to lead yourself, and then two, be able to cast a vision that helps lead other people, right? And so the fact that he had the ability at such an early age to learn how to lead himself towards his passions. And again, you have to be passionate about education and change in a lot of other things for you to want to go to high school at 15. There ain't very many folks. I work with the youngins. There ain't very many of them who want to go to college at 15. They want the freedom of what college brings, but they don't want the discipline and education that college brings. And so knowing that this is what his life ended up making, there's a lot of other decisions that he had to make prior to that. And again, one of them was, who do I follow? Like, especially at 15, you only know 15 years worth of stuff. At 20, 25, you only know so much of things. And a lot of what Martin produced is a result of those he allowed to influence him. And so one of the things that really caught me onto this thought process was the March on Washington. And the March on Washington is where he gave his I Have a Dream speech. And this was in 1963. And it drove about 250,000 people, one of the largest, not largest peaceful protests that we've seen to date. But the reason that I came to this thought process of like, you can be a confident leader and a wise follower was because of one of the folks who pretty much helped spearhead the March on Washington. I didn't know it wasn't Martin. I know that he spoke there. I know he gave his I Have the Dream speech there, but I didn't know how this thing came about. And come to find out, it was a gay man. Come on. So for me, I ended up watching the Rustin, which is on Netflix. Highly recommend it. Bayard Rustin is the man's name. And he was an openly gay, black, male activist of that time. And sure, yes, there were plenty others. But what drove me to this movie was because you hear it's easy to think that, how should I say this? I was put onto the movie because I heard that MLK had a gay advisor. And as a gay woman, that's just, to me, I'm like, that's dope, especially when it comes to Black history and the movement, and knowing that some of the other folks that Martin followed and his roots is in Christianity. And so this is what kind of stirred up a lot of my thought process around this and what led me to the movie and really seeing how our influences impact our leadership ability. So when I was watching this movie, it was and again, obviously Hollywood makes things up to be a certain way, but it was cool to see the relationship between Bayard and MLK, because you could see Martin's body language. You could see that he respected Bayard just for being him. And again, as a Black gay woman, you have to fight really hard for respect from a lot of folks just in general. And so if you have this man here, and Martin has already done multiple different things up to this point, to see him submit to the leadership of Bayard was like, that's fire. And it was in that moment where he was kind of pressed in some ways that I saw Martin say, okay, yep. And that told me, if you're really going to be a confident leader, you have to have the ability to be a wise follower. Now, what made Bayard a wise follower was he was fierce. He knew what he was talking about. He was intentional. He didn't back down. He got literally beat by the police for being who he was. He got shamed. Imagine all these different things, not just to be Black in the 60s, but to be Black and gay and a male in the 60s. And also what happened was there is a scene where they try to make Bayard and MLK's relationship seem inappropriate, for lack of better words. They try to make it seem like they had a quote unquote inappropriate relationship with each other, because obviously Martin is married and has kids. And so they tried to make it seem like it was just this nasty, toxic thing going on in the background, like the media trying to stir up some bad blood. And that caused some friction between the relationship for a little bit. And not to talk about the movie for too long, because I want you to watch it. But I share that piece to show that in Martin choosing to still have Bayard as one of his closest advisors, and also somebody who led, again, this movement, it shows that he was serious about being a wise follower. And I know I keep harping over that statement of being a wise follower, but I truly believe that discernment in what it means to move with caution is a big deal, because all of those allegations could have came out about their relationship, and Martin could have been like, nah, I don't want nothing to do with this dude. But he didn't. He had a relationship with him. And I believe a part of being a wise follower is having a relationship with those that you allowed to lead you. And so because Martin knew the heart of Bayard, he was able to develop a relationship, and he knew and he could stand on and stand up for Bayard in other spaces. Like, he could take the allegations, he could take all this other stuff. And when, again, the media tried to portray Bayard as a homosexual man who, who does like all those things, Martin stood up for him. So he was able to lead and be led and stand up to a lot of folks who tried to trash his friend as well. So all that to say is, it was watching this film and thinking about how we go through life as only really prioritizing leadership and almost demonizing followership, that it led me to this thought of, you have to know the heart of folks, because you may not ever really know everybody who you lead. Like, Martin is still leading people to this day, right? Obviously he's passed, but like, in that, there were 250,000 people who came up to that. And that's just the ones who could make it there in the 1960s. You're never going to really know everybody that you lead, but you can get to know those that lead you. So I'm working out this thought with y'all kind of at the same time, because there's so many things that are swimming in my mind as I am every day trying to chop down the amount of influences I have in my life, because I understand the power of being influenced. I understand the power of being an influencer, and being an influencer now means something completely different than what it did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10, we can just stop at 10 years ago. Being an influencer did not mean what it means today. And it's almost taken on, for some people, a negative connotation, to where you can hear some folks say, oh, I don't want to be an influencer, I want to have impact. But it's almost one and the same. But because the word influencer has now become somebody who is on social media and they just live who knows what kind of life, and they're influencing people to do certain things, people are trying to get away from the term influencer. But to have impact and to lead is to influence. So, yeah, I think we really have to think about, who are we allowing to influence us? And so before I go into that piece, I want to talk about a couple other folks that Martin allowed himself to be influenced by in order for him to stand on and be intentional with being a peaceful, nonviolent protester. And the first was his parents, his dad. His dad, when he was a child, was also a pastor. His dad also led marches to end discrimination. Like I said earlier, him and his grandfather, or his dad and his grandfather, both went to Morehouse. And again, to know Morehouse is to know that they're very intentional with the type of character that they're developing in the young men that attend there. So to know that his grandfather went there and that his dad went there, and those lessons were instilled into him, he was raised up to become the man that he was. He was raised up to be the leader that he was, and really is, because his life is still having impact. And so if you're raised up to be something, you had to follow suit. You were influenced by what was given to you. And so the first sphere for him was at home. The second was, he was influenced by, I believe, his heart and his passions. He ended up getting his degree in sociology, later went on to seminary and got his doctorate in theology, and became an assistant minister and then a pastor, and then again achieved all the things that he did. So he was Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King. And bruh passed at 35, was assassinated, at 35. Cut that out. When I think about all of the energy that he lived with, he sincerely lived with a fierce fight, legacy driven, that was focused on freedom. Like, he wanted people to be free. So much so that he was willing to die for it. And I'm going to read a quote from him. And he said, "There's nothing greater in all the world than freedom. It's worth going to jail for. It's worth losing a job for. It's worth dying for. And then he encouraged folks and said, my friends, go out this evening determined to achieve this freedom which God wants for all his children. Like, do you feel so connected to your purpose, your mission, that you're willing to die for it? Is it like, that's how I feel. Do you feel like the thing that I've been called to do and been put here on this earth is I'm gonna die for it? And I think if we're not able to answer that question, and some people are like, no, absolutely not. Okay, I hear you, no smoke. But for me, I'm so committed to helping people live out their purpose with confidence that I'm willing to die for it. I've risked my life for it. I mean, I became a full-time entrepreneur for it, which it requires blood, sweat, and tears. And in this day that we're living in now, I believe we all have this same type of calling and purpose in us. And every single person is meant to lead someone in some way, to do their part, to help people get free. Because there's too many people who literally don't have the ability to get free, to be free, whether that's mentally, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, physically, in every way. People are in bondage. And so it requires every single one of us to do our part. If you feel any sense of freedom, it's your job to help other people get free. And when Martin, again, I'm read this, he says there's nothing greater in all the world than freedom. When you're free for the free, I mean, even thinking about it, to be free to be me right now is, I don't even want to call it a blessing, because it should be a given. Like to experience living life in this body, in this world. And again, as a black woman, mass presenting woman, lesbian, sometimes it don't feel like I'm free enough to be me. And I know what it felt like historically to not feel like I could be me. And so I'm grateful for Bayard Rustin. I'm grateful for Martin Luther King. I'm grateful for his father and his grandfather, for all those folks that influenced him to do what he needed to do in order to create the change that needed to be created back when my mom was only 4. That's 1960, was not that long ago. And so without him doing his part, who knows what the world would look like for folks like me. And so I want to challenge you and call you and encourage you to say that there's something you were created to do. And a part of what you were created to do is to help other people get free. Because I agree that there's nothing greater in the world than freedom. And so if there's nothing greater in the world than freedom, if you feel a sense of freedom in your life, then what are you doing with your freedom to help other folks get free? And again, that can look completely different, because there's multiple different aspects to it: spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, psychologically, financially. Like, what part of your purpose do you feel like is designed to help other people get free? That's the question I want to leave you with. Not leave you, because we're going to keep going, but that's the question I want to give to you right now. The next thing, or the next person that Martin followed and was influenced by, was Jesus. And this one was important. Jesus and Bayard was important for me in knowing that he was crafted, followed, influenced by Jesus, and then knowing that he was influenced and befriended Bayard was a big deal. Why is it a big deal? Well, because my entire life, going back to freedom, I didn't feel like I was free enough to be me. And why did I not feel like I was free? Because of what white Christianity and white narcissism and white supremacy, white, all of that spoke to me and in my life, was it minimized all these other intersections that I have. And it's been a big deal to hear and see and know folks be able to bridge faith and sexuality. And so in my deconstructing era of life, to be able to see such a strong, prominent figure that centered Jesus, but also was again able to marry those two things was healing for me. And so when I think about Jesus, I think about peace. I think about love for all. I think about sitting with humans in their humanity. And again, I think about freedom. And so Martin was influenced by Jesus. His peace movement was influenced by how do we do things in this way? How do we lock arms with our brothers and sisters in a way that allows all humanity to be equal? And seeing folks for who they are. That right there is freedom. The last person that I'm going to bring up that Martin was influenced by was Gandhi. Again, peace. So all of these influences allowed him to lead a peaceful protest. I don't say a peaceful life, but a peaceful protest in multiple. He is known for being a peacemaker. He's known for nonviolent movement because of those he was influenced by. That he said, you know what? I believe this is the way that I want to go. And based off of those that I've learned from and being influenced and seeing how they do those things, I believe you can get this thing done this way. And because of that, we have a better world than what it was 50, 60 years ago. Are we where we should be? Absolutely not. But is it better than where we were? Absolutely. And I think that because of his intent, because of his ability to be led, that he was able to lead millions because he was wise enough to follow few. Now, here's some questions that I have for you. I want you to think about this. Do you know who to follow and when to follow? Do you know who to follow and when to follow? And I ask that, do you know who to follow and when to follow? Because it's easy for us to get caught up in just following anybody. It's easy for us to know, or it's easy for us to think about, you know what? I'm going to just fall back and I'm going to let somebody else lead. But a part of leadership is also knowing when you should lead and when you should step back and follow. But it's humility that requires us, or that gives us the ability to be able to say, you know what? They got it. And in that instance, again, with the March on Washington, Martin was able to say, you know what? Bayard got it. And he lost nothing for it. He gained. And then what's cool about Bayard is if you watch the movie, which I hope you do, at the very end of the movie, he's seen picking up trash after the 250,000 people left. He's picking up trash. And he was invited to sit at the table to go meet with the president with the other people. He was like, no, I got it. I'm going to pick up the trash. And I know I'm talking about Martin, but I'm just talking about leadership and followership and serving and heart posture and what does it look like to show up and just do your part. And in that, I was like, man, how dope is that? That a leader who helped lead this movement was able to put the face of somebody else. So he led, he followed, and he served. I want to lead a life. I want to live a life that I lead, I follow, and I serve. And I will die in pursuit of that. And so again, it makes me question, do you know when to follow, when to lead? Do you know who to follow and when to follow? Another question I have for you is how has those that you follow on social media impact your thoughts about yourself? So again, how has who you follow on social media impact the thoughts you have about yourself? The reason why this question comes up is because it's easy for us to get on the phone and start to scroll. And when you get on the phone and you start to scroll, we start to get into a comparison loop. And comparison, in and of itself, is not bad or destructive. comparison with the wrong perspective becomes destructive. So if I'm getting on social media and I'm not cognizant about who I'm following, I can see, or I can be influenced by some of the things that I see, because my perspective or my emotions and my heart and my feelings and my thought may not all be in alignment. And then now all I did was just get destructively influenced with destructive comparison. And then I get off my phone and I put it down and I'm like, dang, why do I feel worse about myself? All I did was scroll on social. That's because you're not cognizant of who you're following and what you're looking at. So the question is, how has who you follow on social impact your thoughts about yourself? Do you get off social media and feel bad about yourself and your life, or do you get off feeling the same? And if you get off feeling better, that don't make it any better, because if you're using other folks that you see and then now you're coming from a judgment spot, then that just says more about your heart than it does about maybe them and their situation. So there's a lot to talk about comparison here. But it's important though to recognize who we following on social and what does that say about us? So the next question is, what does who you follow say about you? What does who you follow say about you? What kind of accounts do you follow? What kind of information are you getting in across the board? What does that say about you and your beliefs and your thoughts and your ideas, your philosophies? Like, what does who you follow say about you? Because it's important for us to know that this being influenced is a big deal. All the information that we get, that we take in, is going to permeate through us, and it's going to come out in some way, shape, or form. It's going to come out of our words. It's going to come out of our behaviors. It's come out in our thoughts. And so what does who you follow say about you? Do you follow accounts that you're like, I don't really want nobody to know I follow it, but I follow it? That's a conversation you got to have with yourself. The next question I want you to think about is, who do you allow to influence your thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors? Who do you allow to influence your thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors? Because who we allow to influence our thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors ultimately has some power over us. They're a part of our leaders. And they may not be leading you in actual real life, but they're leading you in some way, shape, or form. So who do you allow to influence your thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors? Like I said a little bit ago, I am in a season of increasing or decreasing who and increasing how. So increasing my thought process around, how do I decrease the amount of folks that I allow to influence me? And how do I get that much more cognizant around when I'm just being freely influenced? How do I be more intentional with, like, ooh, where did I get this thought from? Where did I get this belief from? Where did I pick up this behavior? Where did that come from? In making sure I'm only picking up thoughts and beliefs and behaviors that align with the person that I believe that I want to be, the person I believe I was created to be, and the purpose that I'm supposed to live out. Does this thought align? Does this belief align? Does this behavior align? If it doesn't, where did I get it from? Why did I pick it up? Why am I still holding on to it? And the last question is, how has who you follow impacted your leadership? How has who you follow impacted your leadership? Because again, to be a leader is to have followers. Period. But we're always being influenced. So I want you to become cognizant of how you're being influenced and how that influence is shaping and impacting your leadership, because it's then permeating onto those that you are leading. So the last question I want to leave you with is this. Are you leading a life you're willing to die for? And are those you are following doing the same? Are you leading a life that you're willing to die for? And are those you are following willing to do the same? I only want to follow folks that are just ridiculously passionate about humans and what they do. Like, I listen to how people talk about themselves and others. And then if it doesn't align with equality in humanity and in the things that I believe in, I have to become that much more guarded around that person and their thoughts. I have to be that much more intentional with like, oh, okay, cool, let me watch the practice because I can study the film, but I don't have to consume. And so a lot of this is just encouragement around being more intentional with how we're influenced, whether that's on social media, music, TV, movies, all of that, podcasts, all the above. Because what we listen to, what we consume becomes a part of us. And too often people are not understanding about how they're influenced and how they're following and how that following influences how they lead. And so I want you to remember that MLK led millions, but he only followed few. And it's important for us to be confident leaders and wise followers. And by being a wise follower, it's not about following everybody, but about following those that you know who can lead you in the direction, who can help you become the person that you were created to be. And not everybody that you follow has the ability to do that. So being a confident leader and a wise follower is not about following everybody. It's about following folks who have the ability to influence you to become the person that you were created to be. And not everybody has the right to do that. I hope that in some way, shape, or form, this episode blessed your life in some way, that you got something out of this, that you're influenced to say, you know what, I want to put some more respect, not only on my leadership ability, but on my followership ability. And that's on social media. That's on TV. What am I supporting? What am I doing? What does that say about me? What does that say about my beliefs? How does that influence my thoughts? How does that influence how I lead? How does that influence how I show up in the world? So to be cognizant about your followership means to be wise, means to discern, means to be intentional, which ultimately influences your ability to lead. So I thank you guys for showing up here today. I pray and hope that this impacted you in some way, shape, or form. If it did, I hope that you shared, like, and subscribe, all that other fun stuff. But at the end of the day, I want you to remember that you are worthy of living out your confident life and that you are the bag. I believe in you. I love you. Until next time, peace.